Okay, we're back again here at allpointstv.com. Want to thank all of the ones that are here with us now at 2 o'clock in the afternoon on Monday. That's our meeting time from 2 o'clock to 3. And we'll be back here again next week and the week after and keep on being back here because we are the on-time machine and we're also the ones that will in fact be here, rain, shine, sleet or snow or whatever the holidays are. We don't stop. We don't quit. We're not, we're not going to quit until they quit. And that means all the ones in Washington that are, in fact, they have not done this declarative yet, but I'm sure that you're noticing that we are in war with our rulers in this country. And they have not declared the war, but they have not declared a war in this country since the World War II, December the 8th. And then thereafter, some of the nations that they declared war on based upon the tumbling effect of the war. Once we got into it in 1942, although the declaration of war for the retaliation we were doing because of Pearl Harbor, they attacked us at Pearl Harbor December the 7th. And then the next day, Roosevelt knew that he could go to the Congress and he was not going to have any problem getting a declaration of war against Japan. And after the attack they did, that he knew was coming, by the way, if you read John Toland's work.
See, I grew up knowing that he it was up to what they said is when I was growing up and I was told this by my family that up to 2 weeks before the attack he knew about the impending attack on Pearl. And what it was is the Japanese delegation was supposed to be in Dulles' office, waiting and be allowed to come in. So they declared war. And then the attack was supposed to commence. He knew about it, so he kept them waiting until after the attack started and then let them in the office. Yeah. And then it looked like a surprise sneak attack. And actually, one of the men were so distraught about that, he went back and committed suicide, seppuku,
John, so, how did you know that? Because you're exactly right. How did you learn that?
But I grew that. My parents knew that.
They knew.
Yeah, because you see, I had relatives on Pearl. They were like Army Corps. It was an Army Air Corps pilot. My one aunt, my great aunt, married this man. And they were stationed at Pearl Harbor. And 2 weeks we knew that the thing is too, another thing is people miss the carriers, which are the more recent development and addition to the fleet. They weren't bombed. It was the old Liberty ships that were the ones that were allowed to take the hit. Mm-hmm. The carriers are out at sea. Mm-hmm. Okay. So they knew that they actually were supposed to be, they made sure they were all on patrol or whatever. Okay. So that was convenient. Then none of the carriers got hit. I don't recall. Now, I could be wrong, but I never heard of one of the carriers getting hit. It was the older fleet, parts of the fleet, the ones that made during the First World War that were positioned in the harbors there at the time. Yeah,
I'm amazed at you. But I know that, John, you're exactly right in what you're saying. People do not understand how rulers see the persons they rule. And nothing could be a more explicit example of that than what John just was talking about. How that means that some people will sacrifice in order for the, larger cause, we could say. And there was a sacrificial type of thing that occurred on December the 7th. They had broken the Japanese code and they had deciphered what the Japanese were talking about, plus the fact that the embargo that they had, the oil embargo against Japan, was inviting an attack. And so when they were going to respond to it, it wasn't surprising it would start planning a way to respond to the embargo because that cutting off and sanctioning that was going on could strangle the economy of Japan, and it could, in fact, create certain instability inside the country. They could not live with that, and they're not going to take it. They're going to fight back, and that was very much known.
Yeah,
so they knew that this attack was pending.
So I knew about this growing up, and I always had a distrust for the government, but one of my own grandfathers, my mom's dad was a socialist and a Democrat, big diehard Democrat. Mm-hmm. And so there was like division amongst my own family. Like my dad's family were largely Republican, or they would vote for the individual mostly, but I always saw that the Democrats were the more manipulative and the ones that they saw, but the rest of us were just chess pieces and they can move them about. And this is supposed to be the party of the working class.
Right.
We're growing up to being taught that by the unions and stuff like that. The Democrats cared about the working class, but most of it, when I looked at the working class's party, I never saw the leadership actually coming from the rank and file. Yeah. For the most part, they were elitist, especially the upper elites. Like Roosevelt's family, he was connected to like 7 or 8 past presidents in his family's lineage through marriage, through connections like that. So he was they've always considered himself elite. Well, if you actually look at it now, Bushes and stuff like that always had connections to past presidents.
Yeah, John, your information and your knowledge base is always very surprising. I mean, not that I didn't know that you're very smart, but I'm just amazed how many areas you're in, and your understanding of that is very intriguing. You don't get into a lot of conversations where people, you know, I don't. Everybody has a tremendous amount of intelligence, but they don't have a tremendous amount of information. I think that was a point, by the way, was being made right as I was listening away to the studio. That's what Dennis Prager was saying, that he has not met a lot of people who he felt that were his inferiors in terms of their mental acuity, but and maybe the information levels would be different. I'm always amazed when I listen to John. He's in so many different areas, but I was really thinking about when he was talking about the they were keeping the Japanese envoy waiting, and guess who was in that room, John? You know, when they're out there waiting, guess who was in there talking to Roosevelt at that time? Joe Louis.
Okay.
And Joe Louis was in there, and he wasn't getting, and it's always a little bit of an insult, quite frankly, to keep a diplomat waiting, and you're talking to quote unquote a commoner. And although Joe Louis is prominent because he's the heavyweight champion between 37 and 1949, Joe Louis had that championship belt for 12 years and had defended his crown for 25 times a record.
And his training camp was in Holly, Michigan.
In Holly, Michigan.
Yep.
Yeah. It's interesting, John. It brings back a lot of memories because I can remember, growing up, then it had that, I could swear that Joe Louis pop was the best pop because they had Joe Louis's name on it. Had a pop name after him.
Didn't know that. But
I thought I could actually, go out there and beat somebody up in the neighborhood. I don't know how many knuckle sandwiches I got because of that.
But I'm drinking Joe Louis pop.
Yeah, right.
No, did you call it soda down there, or did you call it pop?
No, we call it drink. I'm going to the store to get me a drink.
Okay.
And we knew that was, and I didn't learn the word pop till I came to visit my father in Detroit, and they had, and they were using the word pop up here. When I went back to Birmingham and I started calling it pop, boy, I was a hero in my neighborhood. They never heard that before, and they thought that was so cool.
So I know. See, I know some people. See, to me, growing up here, a soda was a mixture of pop and ice cream.
Is that right?
That's what to me it was. I mean, they had sodas, and you went to the soda fountain. You had soda, had ice cream in it, and then the local variety was called the Boston Cooler by Burger.
Yeah,
and that's a big thing. Ginger ale and ice cream mix.
Yeah,
that was a big thing, but that was always called the Boston Cooler. I don't know why they call it Boston Cooler because people from Boston never heard of it. But anyway, but then some people from the South would call it, they'd call it a Coke. Every pop was or beverage was considered a Coke. So.
Yeah, that's a very interesting time. We didn't have a lot of names like you have now. Everything has multiple names to it. We can't even figure out a woman is very, to me, there's no mystery here. And what a man is, there's no mystery to that either. And when a man is jumping in the pool and there are women in the pool, he's jumping there with them. That's a man in the pool. I don't know why we can't figure that stuff out. But when we were, I think at that time period, we were much more of a simplistic people, and we didn't have all this noise being made about simple stuff. Anyway, the point I was trying to make was that people, there are very few people that have inferior intellect, but there is not the same level of knowledge that people are walking around with. I was saying I was very surprised sometimes. John surprised me a lot of times in the studio because he goes into a lot of areas, and when I mention something, he can import based on his background and learning. It always amazed me. But that attack, we've not declared war in this country since World War II. There's been no declared war in this country. In this war they have now, which I think there's a war going on between our government and the American people, there's no declared war either, and I don't expect it to be declared. But I do see the warfare being waged against American people. Some of it economic, even in this one thing that we see going on right now, where Janet Yellen, who I think should be impeached just because what she did when she was the Fed chair. She was terrible, and so is Jerome Powell, who's the Fed chair right now. Janet Yellen was making a statement that the recession, we don't have a recession because there's not a comprehensive downturn. In other words, in every quarter of the economy, some parts of it are not debilitated. Therefore, the recession is not comprehensive to all arenas of the economy, and therefore we're not in a recession. So what has been the definition of it for the last 50 years, where you have a decline in GDP for two different quarters. You know, I think when I was coming up, when they said a quarter of an hour, I was thinking that was 25 minutes because I was basing it on the 100% scale, and it was a revelation to me when I went to. I never forget. I went to the shoe repair. We sit in there a lot of times in this place where this Mr. Hines had a business. We sit in there as children. He would do that, let us come in there because he's getting us off the street, as I realize it now. But one time he asked me, what is the time for a quarter to 6? And I said, that would be, he says a quarter after 6. So I'm thinking, okay, a quarter, I'm thinking that's 25, that's 6:25. And he would say, no. And they would do stuff like that in our neighborhood because they were trying to get us to think. There was a guy that would ask me just things that wanted your mind to operate. One guy asked me, if you had $1 million and you took a penny from it, how much would you have? And I would say, I get the first part right. I say 999,999. And he say, nope. And I go away thinking about it. I never get it right. Because what I was missing out was $999,999 dollars and then 99 cents. I never could get that last part right. He would walk away and nope. But he would never give me the answer. And it was just such a simple time. But they would do little things like that to get the children minds churning. I realize now what they were doing, but I didn't understand it then. I was always frustrated because he asked these questions and I never could get the answers because I was what kind of thinker was I? I was linear. I was never a linear thinker where you have this line. I'm not an I'm an out of the box thinker, and the linear thinker is like this, kind of lining up the information, this kind of thing. I'm more scattered in my thought process than many people are, and I'm kind of like a polymath in the sense that I'm in multiple areas. So my thinking is not just in a straight line. And when I meet somebody like John reminds me of a person that is the multidimensionality of your scholarship, because I don't meet a lot of people like that. But we haven't declared war in this country since World War II, and it was around the time period of declaring war on Japan in December the 8th, the day after they had bombed Pearl Harbor. And Roosevelt knew he could go to the Congress and get a war declared. It's too much politics in it now. So what has happened in the last whatever the number of years from 1945 to present time, whatever the number of years that have passed since that time period, they don't declare war now because the politicians don't want to expose themselves. They want to be on all sides of all issues, and therefore we have not declared a war since 1945 in this country. But you can see evidence of it in terms of what's really going on by the government's behavior.
I took this class one time when I was at a seminar, and they were talking about reason why they didn't declare war very often, even though during the time of Korea, that wasn't actually declared war. Vietnam wasn't a declared war. And the reason why is is because they didn't want the markets to be upset, the economic markets. Even though they were shifting gears, they're taking a big portion of the GDP to gear it up for wartime production and buying those materials and stuff for war, especially like Korea and Vietnam and all the other wars. I mean, it continues. They want people to be constantly focused on that and the thing is, this country, we've been at war since pretty much the time we started. I think there's only like a 23rd, if you add up together over the length of time we exist as a country, maybe 20 to 35 years 30 years we weren't actually at war. But if you actually look at it from the 60s all the way now, we've always been at war.
Yeah, there's not been a 5-year period. You were saying the Korean War, okay, it's 1950. We really have not had a continuous 5-year period where the country was not at war. And I think the reason, they can say other things about it as well, and there will be other reasons why that would be true, that we have not declared war since the World War II. But a lot of it also is the political aspect and the fact that there is no respect for the rule of law. I mean, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 11, one of the 18 powers stipulated in the enumeration of powers in Article 1, Section 8. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 11 says that Congress shall have the power to declare war. Now, that's what it says. So what is happening is through the imperial presidency, we have the president, since the president cannot declare it, but what they do there is take the Article 2 provision where the president is the commander in chief, and then use that provision and then skirt around the Article 1, Section 8, Clause 11, to which, if you look at the separation of powers, and it should be sacrosanct. I mean, if you don't have that, you don't have anything. You don't have a constitution, you have a separation of powers, because that's the fundamental and foundational parts of the Constitution, power in different corridors, not to be wielded by one person. When you start putting another corridor of power in one of the 3 branches of government where it was not placed there by the framers, then that is sabotage and undermining the Constitution of the United States. It doesn't get more serious than that. But the declaration of war fundamentally is a political act. And one problem they have with that is that American people are not a warlike people. You can say what you want to. It's a government that is involved in these wars. The American people during the height of these wars, like take the Vietnam War, at the height of the war, you had Frida Payne singing, "Bring the boys home. Bring the boys home, bring them back alive, bring them boys home, bring them back alive. What are they doing over there now? We need them over here now." And you had this other song. I was going to Michigan State at the time, doing some grad work. And you go to the weekend, the dance that they had, and they were out there. They were really jamming. I mean, they were just going at it. And that song was War. What is it good for? Absolutely nothing. Say it again. And they were out there. I mean, I knew then that Vietnam was over as far as a war effort, because they were out there dancing to the anti-war movement. And you saw them out there in the street eventually. And they made Johnson stand down. That's why Johnson didn't run for another term. He was eligible to run for another term because he walked up into the presidency when John F. Kennedy was assassinated on the 22nd of November, 1963. He only had 1 year left on his term, and the Constitution requires a 10-year maximum in the White House. And if you serve more than 2 years of another president's term, you only allow 1 term, because you cannot serve more than 10 years, and 4 plus 4 plus a term of 2 more years of another term is more than 10 years. And I will answer this question too, because some have always raised it. You cannot run for vice president either because of Amendment 12. If the president is not eligible for the presidency, he's not eligible for the vice presidency either. Why? Because you're going to stand up to it. So it's a lot of reason why we've not had declared war, but look how many years we've been out of war for a 5-year period of time. We have not been out of war since World War II for a 5-year continuous period of time, and we're not out of the war now. You can talk about Ukraine all you want to, it being a proxy war, but U.S. is involved in that war, and they got soldiers over there too. The American people just don't see it. They don't telegraph that, and they don't televise it. And if it doesn't get airtime on television, it doesn't exist. And they found that out by the reason why the reason why they put the January 6th committee meetings on television, to air it as an important event. I wrote an article today. I think you should read it. And I'm challenging all the scholars. They're not going to say anything because I'm so much above them in terms of my training and their training. And I prove that every time we talk about the Constitution, because they don't know this document. I'm here to challenge all of them. We have the same degrees. We don't have the same level of knowledge about it. And they're going to take these notes before it's over, because I'm challenging everything they're saying out here. They can say it to the layman. They can't say it to me. And I hear what they say to the layman. They say, I call the names out because I know they're not going to come in this arena. I said last week before last, that Lawrence Tribe, he was a long-running professor at Harvard University. I think he's emeritus now from Harvard University. And he made the comment that when they did the impeachment, the first impeachment of Donald Trump, they didn't run it over there immediately in the Senate. And he made the comment that the impeachment was not official until it had been referred to the Senate. When I hear comments like that, I have to tell you I do a double take, because I can't believe a scholar would say that. And you really can't be a scholar saying things like that. You can't be a scholar of the Constitution saying that. When you understand not only are the quarters of power in the Article 1, 2, and 3 provisions of the Constitution, it's also there is a separation of the powers within the context of the separation that is mandated by Article 1, Article 2, and Article 3. So there is a legislative branch of government, which makes the law. There is an executive branch of government that enforces the law, and there's a judicial branch of government that, in fact, interprets the law. But within those three branches, there's also a further division in terms of the specificity of the responsibilities in each of the corps of power if in the legislative branch. There are certain things that are ordered to the House, as in Article 1, Section 2, and there are things ordered to the Senate in Article 1, Section 3. Therefore, when you look at that delineation of power in the legislative branch, Article 1, Section 2, setting up the House, then the impeachment, which starts in the House, is set up in Article 1, Section 2. That's why it says in Article 1, Section 2, Clause 5, that the House, listen very careful, Lawrence Tribe, you're not going to say anything because you're not qualified. I'm challenging all of you. And I wrote some things today on my Facebook post that I think they need to read, because I'm going to challenge the January 6th committee and what they're doing.
I'd like to know this. I'd like to know these people who just willingly go along with what Tribe and all these other people say, pro-offer as the definitions or for what makes an impeachment viable or whatever. Why they wholesale accept it when the Constitution itself, the document they're commenting on, is available to everybody. The wording's pretty clear cut. I don't understand why they have to. Okay, are they going to say there's historical precedent? Like, they ruled on the Supreme Court at this time ruled on this case that was connected to this on the, precedent on this. I don't see why people are so obligingly taking people like Lawrence Tribe, people like Dershowitz's explanation for it, when you can easily look up what the Constitution itself says.
Mhm.
I mean, I don't know why we're giving such credence to these people, other than because they're such allegedly prestigious institutions.
That's part of it.
But I mean, that doesn't.
Big part of it.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't understand that. I don't.
Yeah, that is a big part of it. You mentioned Harvard, and the assumption is that these people are the top of the food chain as far as academia is concerned. I take Ayn Rand's word on that. That we had intellectuals in that room in Philadelphia from May the 25th, when they finally had enough to convene they were supposed to be there on the 14th of May, but they didn't have enough persons that were there at that time. And so they didn't have a quorum. They didn't have a quorum until May the 25th. So there are most persons would put the convention starting on that date, the date in which they have the quorum. I think that's a mistake. Also, I think that the date for the actual deliberations, based upon what they have been sent there to do, would be June the 25th, 1 month later. So I date it a little bit different than they do. I date the convention being having a beginning point June 25th to September 17th. They would not agree with my dates. I don't agree with their dates, and that's fine. We can have arguments about that. What we cannot have arguments about is what the Constitution requires. And I'm going to say a few things here that they will, in fact, take my notes on, and I can guarantee they will not say anything here publicly about it, or it's going to get very hot in the sense that we have to go to the document and see if which one is right and which one is wrong. But you see, what they do is that I noticed that I don't think they go along with Lawrence Tribe and some of the things he's saying, because Lawrence Tribe is an activist, and they'll say that when Biden said that he has talked to some scholars about the Constitution not being absolute, the amendments not being absolute. He'll say some of the scholars that he talks to blah 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 about agreeing that would be the case. He's not talking about a lot of scholars. He's talking about Lawrence Tribe, and I don't know anyone else who would make a reckless statement like that. But Lawrence Tribe has shown himself to be an activist, and he's very dangerous because of the level that they take him seriously in what he says and what this man is saying, because of the arena it plays off into, and people listen to him that have power, and then they use him as a cover for the things they're doing that's anti-constitutional. That makes him very dangerous. I consider him to be very dangerous. Lawrence Tribe is a very, very dangerous person. Even Alan Dershowitz will make a criticism of Tribe in that regard, but they're both wrong in some of the things they're saying about the Constitution. But even Alan Dershowitz takes some issue with Lawrence Tribe in terms of Tribe taking some extra curricular lodges in license in some of the claims he's making that cannot be sustained based upon the document. But people don't know the document, and so they allow that to be said. He can't say it here. He won't say it here. He won't come in. He will not come in this arena. Neither will Alan Dershowitz. Not when it comes to the Constitution. Because because I'll tell you this, they're over their head. See, we all have, you can have the same degrees, but that does not mean the level of understanding the degrees are based upon are the same in every case. I mean, you have that in terms of the graduation ceremony. The top 10, they're not on the same level as the others that got the same degree. The top 10 would be the top 10. It's not where Biden was. Biden was in the bottom of every class he's ever been in. And I'll tell you something, they're not gonna like to hear this, but nothing this man says should be taken on the merits of the statement unless you check it out for yourself. Because this man is not only not smart, this man is a nut. You have to be a nut to say that no amendment is absolute. I don't think I have been more offended by anything that's been said by anyone in position of power than I was offended by that statement being made. Because I will tell you this, not only is every amendment except Amendment 10 absolute, every amendment except Amendment 10 is absolute, because there's only one amendment in all of the 27 amendments in the Constitution, which has been amended 18 times, because the first 10 were amended in 1791, all amended at the same time. So the first 10, it was originally 20 to 22 of them that were in fact proposed, but 10 of them were ratified, and they were all ratified at the same time as a block of amendments, which they call the Bill of Rights, which is another part of the misconstruing of the Constitution, which is a fan out from the Declaration of Independence. It is a continuation of the Declaration of Independence. And the Declaration of Independence says, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all people are created equal, that they are born with certain inalienable rights. That's the part of the document that interfaces and folds into the Constitution. And therefore, this idea that there's a Bill of Rights then turns and flips that on his head, because now they're claiming then that our rights do not come from the creative process, that our rights are not natural rights, that they are rights bestowed upon us by the government, and nothing can be more dangerous than that. To say there's a Bill of Rights is dangerous, because with that, and it endangers us as people, because it gives and enlarges that our rights come from the government. If you ever have that as your understanding, do what they did in Australia and see what happens. I knew I should have.
Answer with RTT button.
All right. Let me turn this off. My phone is going crazy again, which I shouldn't have brought it in here, because I can't shut this thing off. As soon as I leave the studio, I'm going to my phone dealer to get this thing, to learn how to shut that voice off, because it just comes on and talks when. Okay. All right. Shut up. I got some shut up here down on the floor. Okay. No, I'm telling you that that comment. Kevin, can you get this right here? Maybe you know how to shut it off. Okay. I'm telling you that the comment that's made that you have to have it referred to the Senate for trial before the impeachment becomes official is nonsense, because there's nothing that commands them to take it to the Senate for a trial. They've always done that because they don't understand it. They've never understood this part of the Constitution. You know, I made a comment years ago, and I made it on my Facebook post, and this one guy that was always looking for some way to come on my post and criticize what I was writing because they disagree with me, which is fine. I don't mind people disagreeing with me. But I do make some claims that are based upon some understandings that nobody else is talking about. So they think that because I'm in a cubby hole and I'm saying things that nobody else is saying, that makes, therefore, by the very sheer volume of others saying other things, it makes this particular specific things being said wrong, because nobody buys into it and then validates it based upon the volume of people talking about it. But I said some years ago, and I still say it today, I'm the only person in this country that understands the impeachment process. And I'm not saying that for anybody to accept it. I'm saying that so that people can come out and prove me to be wrong. You can't say what Lawrence Tribe says and then be right, and you can't say what Alan Dershowitz says and then be right. And therefore I'm wrong, because I say they don't understand the process. You can't say what Tribe said, and you can't say what Alan Dershowitz said. Dershowitz said, and he hasn't changed his mind. So he still stands on what he said, but yet and what he said was that you must have the charge of treason, bribery, and other high crimes and misdemeanors in order to bring about impeachment. Yet he was the trial, one of the trial lawyers on the impeachment of Donald Trump, and they had not accused him of those things: treason, bribery, and other high crimes and misdemeanors. The man made a phone call, and the phone call had, when the president talks to a foreign leader, because there has to be a number of eyes and ears on what's being said, because in the translation, the president singularly listening to it could get it wrong in terms of what was actually said. So you have a number of persons listening in. The president's aware of that. That's not something that's kept a secret. There are multiple people on the phone when the president talking to a foreign leader, a foreign head of state. So when Trump was talking to Zelensky, maybe about 8 to 12 people were listening to the phone call, not because they're spying on the president, but when you come to talk about maybe formulating a policy based upon the conversation, you need to have multiple people having input, and they must have the same knowledge about the conversation that the president has, because he's not the only one going to make that's going to make the policy. The president listens to his cabinet, or should, because you got people that you trust to give you advice. Trump, one thing that they don't ever give Trump any credit for is that Trump was always, he's a smart man, but he's always willing to listen to the input before he makes a decision. Nobody's ever said that's not true about Trump. Sometimes he was listening to a fault, because he listened to people like Mark Milley, the man that was advising him to leave the equipment in Afghanistan. And Trump couldn't believe that, and he asked him to repeat that because he thought he had misheard what this man said. And Mark Milley repeated it, and that Trump says later on, that's when he knew this man was stupid. But that's what happened, because the person he was talking to about it in terms of getting out of Afghanistan, he wasn't talking to Trump, he was talking to Biden. So what does that say? You figure it out. Leaving $85 billion of the best equipment we had in arming the Taliban, and they want to disarm the American people, but arm the enemies of the country. I'm not buying it. Hope you're not buying it, because if that happens, you're gonna really see something. You're gonna see what you're seeing in Canada, and what you're seeing in Australia, what you're seeing in Venezuela, what you're seeing in North Korea, what you're seeing everywhere where the people are disarmed. You're seeing the government coming from behind its mask. I'll tell you something else too. Let me say this without anybody getting mad. All these migrations in history, all these migratory patterns you've had in history where people have migrated from one part of the world to another part of the world. You know why they were migrating? They were trying to get away from government. I know you're going to say they were migrating for religious liberty. Okay, fine. That's a cubby holding of the real issue. It's a way of making it much more succinct. What they're doing is trying to escape the chains that government brings with it. That's why Rousseau said in his book called Social Contract, he says in 1762 that man is born free and every way he's in chains.
Is I always wondered why we permitted it. I mean, why are we allowing these people, when they speak in public, these congressmen, these senators, show nothing but contempt towards the citizens, nothing but contempt, and we keep on going and punching the ticket, voting and backing up. And I don't. I mean, once they show contempt, I usually find another candidate to vote for. It's probably a useless task, because let's face it, once somebody gets in power, their true colors show off. I mean, and I've had friends who run for office. I got them in there, And then they were served a term. I saw the crap they did, and I helped get them out the next time.
Yeah.
I mean, that's right. But people are so resistant against that because they want complacency. They want to be able to say, well, I voted for this person for 45 years. Like the Dingell family. I mean, they've been in power.
Yeah.
John Dingell's family
Mhm.
been in power since the FDR administration. That's 80 years
They
now.
passed it down. It's a family. It's a family. It's a fiefdom owned by the family because only the family has had that job for the last 50 some odd years.
From 1930s. We're talking 1930s.
Yeah, that's right. You're right.
I mean,
That's right, John.
Your dad John Dingell's dad was in office from
Exactly.
1920s, late 1920s, early 30s, all the way through to the 50s.
Yeah.
Then John Dingell's in there from like 50s to like just a couple years before he died.
Right.
And then his wife took over.
Right.
My God,
Yeah.
it's ungodly, man.
It is. I wrote. I would say this on the QTN running. I wrote on the Facebook just a little paragraph. I don't write in paragraphs on Facebook. I write volumes. I have the longest post on Facebook, and I write every day. And because I think we have to say some things to the public, and the 4 or 5 or 6 people you can touch, I know that it doesn't stay there because a lot of persons share it, and then there's 4 or 5 others and all of that. But I make it a point to put up a post every day. But yesterday I wrote a paragraph, and I was saying that the voters in Flint had made the right decision by not voting Karen Weaver back into her position, and that was the right thing to do. And hopefully they will not allow her to make a comeback in the upcoming election because she threw her hat back in the ring, primarily because these politicians have shown that they don't have any marketable skills. And if they're not running for an office through which they get votes and stay in a position based upon the number of votes they get.
I'd like to know this too. People who want to criticize the current mayor, Sheldon Neely, and I had issues with him too, but they want to blame him, basically place it on him, that under his watch, the crime has increased. If you don't have law enforcement in place, you don't have the money for law enforcement. Are the mayors and stuff supposed to be expected to patrol these streets on their own? No. I mean, that's ridiculous. And I just never understood that. I don't care who's in power. If a raise in crime is not, I can't see it's directly blame unless their policies create it. I don't see Sheldon Neely's policies because of being the cause of the increase in crime. It's the lack of enforcement because we have the lack of officers. And I'm not a big pro, badge person, but I mean, that's a simple equation. I mean, you'd have more arrests going on even for simpler things if you had more police on the street. We don't have the police.
They got three officers for each shift, as quiet as it's kept. That's why you find people not stopping for those red lights. They know the chance of them getting caught is very remote because the number of persons on the force for each of the 3 shifts they have. They divided up in 3 shifts. They're not that many. I'm not letting any secrets out here where you can go out there and start violating laws and that.
State police are out there though. It's the state police that might be out there.
If they add some persons from Lansing, but the number of persons that's on the force from the local area, that number is very small. And it's because of a lot of things. Part of it is the tax base, the tax base in Flint, and people are calling for the incorporation of Flint with some other politics so they can enlarge upon the amount of money that you have that will allow for the fire department to be more whatever, and the police department to be more active and things of that sort. But there is a real problem. But see, the thing about what I'm saying here is that if you want to find fault in the present leadership, what you don't want to do is go back to the leadership that you have already expunged from the arena. You don't want to take a step backwards. I mean, we've been there and we've done that. And to go back to what you rejected and then claim it was better than what you thought it was, when it cannot have gotten better because the person wasn't in power to make it better, to go back to that, then taking a step backwards by the fact that you got rid of that and you have to continue to go forward. If Neely is not the person that people are saying that they want, then you go forward with someone else that has not been tried yet, would be the point. But going back to a state of recidivism, I don't know how much sense that would make. That's why I came out and said that they made a decision, I think a good decision, to, in fact, get rid of Karen Weaver. And I don't see how you can now make a case for going back to Karen Weaver we'll see what happens tomorrow in the primary. I'm going to be up early. I didn't get my balloting. I don't vote in Flint, but I vote in the township. And I didn't get my absentee ballot in on time in order to have that where I don't have to go to the polls. But I'll go early where it won't be a large crowd, and there won't be a lot of. And then also the voting is down during the midterm elections also. But I would urge people to go to the polls more so this year than any other year than they've had in my voting lifetime, because the issues are too critical to stay home this time. These politicians have got to learn a lesson here. And John was saying it, that they don't, how did we get so out of control in this country? And it's because of what was it Madison? I keep getting mixed up between Madison and Jefferson. One of them said that when you have the people fearful of the government, there's tyranny. And when you have the government fearful of the people, you have liberty. Well, let me say this, we don't have liberty. And they don't fear the people, nor do they respect them. And that's why the voting is so important in these times, probably more crucial in this time than before, because of what they did and what they're doing right now with the January 6th committee. You know, people need to understand what's happening here. And I know they don't understand it because I can see what they're telling them. And they would not tell them the things they're telling them about the January 6th committee if they knew they had a knowledge base of what really what this country's fundamentals are. They're claiming that they tried to overthrow the election. Let me just tell you something. The election, the president had not even happened by January the 6th. Let me read something to you. You think I'm making this up? Let me read to you Article 2, Section 1, Clause 2. I'm going to read it from the document. Listen very carefully. This is found in Article 2, Section 1, Clause 2 of the Constitution. Okay, Article 2, Section 1, Clause 2. Let me put my specs on. And I want you to listen very carefully. Each state shall appoint in such manner as the legislatures thereof may direct a number of electors equal to the whole number of senators and representatives to which the state may be entitled in the Congress. Now, when you read Article 2, Section 1, Clause 2, I want you to see how the Constitution goes back and forth with the word shall and may in that part of the document. Is because shall is a commandment for the government to act in this way in that regard. There's some wiggle room in the areas where it says may. So it goes back and forth between the two. But I want you to listen to this part right here where it says each state shall appoint. There's no wiggle room there. And I will even say this, and every scholar will be quiet, but let the church be quiet. Wherever the word shall is in the Constitution, that part of the Constitution cannot be amended. You see, the reason why you could, in fact, amend the 18th Amendment was because the word in the 18th Amendment, when they had the prohibition in the Constitution. And then when they in fact came behind it and then placed in there the 21st Amendment in 1933, the reason why they could do that is because the word shall is not there. Where you have shall in the Constitution, that is prohibitive. Now, no scholar gonna go along with me on this, but I dare them to come out publicly and say so. I dare them to do so. They're not gonna say anything because they know I'm out here. They know. And they don't say anything, and they better not say anything. Each state shall appoint in such manner as the legislature thereof may direct a number of electors equal to the whole number of senators and representatives to which the state may be entitled in the Congress. May be entitled because entitlement will be different based upon the population of the states, because the number of electors is based upon the population, which goes up and down. And since in 1925, it was made permanent in terms of numbers of person you have in the Congress. In the House, it was made permanent in terms of members be in the House, and that would be 435 made permanent. So therefore, you have to make some restitution by the loss and gain of state populations, because that number is now sync and etched into law as of 1925, and you have to then make adjustments based on where the numbers are going.
Okay, if the overpopulation overall of the country increases, though, I could see some problem with, say, maybe somebody losing representation because their area lost population. But then again, if it is based upon population and the interests of those people who are in that population, then maybe that is a sufficient number. I don't know. Did you ever consider that?
I don't consider it to be an argument. I understand the argument. I don't consider it to be an argument because the representation is proportional. And so the proportionality of it, if you read Article 1, Section 2, Clause 3, you'll see it in there in terms of the proportional representation. And so you just have to reallocate the proportions to each state. That's what they're doing, by the way, when they say that. See, like Michigan is a good example of that. Michigan used to have 20 electoral votes. It has 16 now. In other words, that's very important also. I think there's another factor involved in why that's important, because you see what these framers did some things in that room. I'll tell you, we had got to understand what was going on in that room. You see, you're being rewarded by the electoral votes, and what's being rewarded is by the rewarding is good governance. If you have bad governance, like in California, in New York, you lose representation. Why? Because you lose citizens. Florida, with DeSantis, is being rewarded with more electoral votes. Why? Because people are going where they're free. That's also happening in South Dakota. They had Christy Nome on Life, Liberty, and Liberty Life, Liberty, and Levine. I'm saying Life and Liberty. Life, Liberty, and Levine. The Fox program comes on Sunday at 8 o'clock. You should tune that program in. There are only 2 programs on Fox now. This is Moss speaking. This is my opinion here. I don't give opinions about the Constitution. I give opinions on other matters. When it comes down to the Constitution, there's specifics involved there. And there's no scholar going to challenge me about anything I say about the Constitution in this country. Because I have to tell you, you think I'm bragging. I know people say you're so arrogant. I'm not bragging. I'm just telling you the facts.
Babe Ruth would say it's not bragging if you can do it.
They're not going to say anything, John, because they're not here on this level. They do have a scholarship, but when you start saying things like what they're saying here, I'm going to challenge them on it, and they're not going to challenge me back. They're gonna be quiet they're gonna be quiet as they've always been quiet. We're on the same network. We on Rumble. They know I'm out here. They can't help but know it because I've been calling their names out, and they remain quiet. I suggest they continue to do that. You cannot say that the matter of the impeachment is not official, not when you have Article 1, Section 2, Clause 5. I can read it to you if you don't think it's in where I say it is. But you don't take my word for it. I'll read it to you if you want me to. Article 1, Section 2, Clause 5. It says, because it sets up the House, and impeachment takes place in the House, it says the House shall choose its Speaker and other officers, and then shall again, and shall have the sole power of impeachment. That's it. You can't come behind that and say that the impeachment has not occurred until it's referred to the Senate for trial, because Article 1, Section 2, Clause 5 says they have the sole power, SOLE, and you can't come behind that and say what Tribe is saying and import his own personality into it. And we need to stop doing that in this country. Now let me come to the January 6th committee. I need to say something about this committee. The January 6th committee is meeting unconstitutionally. But so what? You might have heard of the document called the Constitution of the United States. It's not any longer being recognized as a law of the land. And they show that they do not recognize the law of the land by the fact that they fight over who's sitting on the Supreme Court. The reason why that battle takes place every time there's an appointment coming on the court, and also why there's talk going on now about packing the court, is because they do not recognize the Constitution as the law of the land in this country. And if the Constitution, if the members of the court, 5 of them say one thing, that's the law of the land, based upon them saying that it says that. And if 5 say something different, you saw it in Roe v. Wade, where they had one ruling in place in 1973, and less than about a month ago, they changed it. They did not make the same ruling because they had 5 that said differently, and therefore the law has been altered, but the Constitution has not been changed. The Constitution, based upon and overlapping with the Declaration of Independence, is based upon the fact that all people have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That has not changed. And to alter that and then make it talk about the democratization of that is abhorrent to the framers. And you want to knock them and say that they were this and they were that. I hear this all the time when I'm out here talking to people, and they want to remind blacks in particular, remind me that they were slave owners. Yeah, they were. I said 17 of them were slave owners. I made a mistake there. 19. I went back to check behind myself. 19 of them were slave owners. And that's the greatness in that room, because even though that they did that, they had that. You ought to read what Jefferson wrote in the Declaration of Independence. There's 27 arguments he put in there is why they were declaring their independence. You should read that document and read what Jefferson was saying in that document was that the King of England did this. The King of England did that. They don't want to read that part, because if we read that part, they'll see the enslavement in this country through a different lens. It wasn't created by the founders or anybody in that room. The 19 members of that in that room, of the 56 people that gathered there, starting on May the 25th, when the quorum finally showed up, and not all of them are there even at that point. They're trickling in, And some of it's distance and transportation and things of that sort. You know, we're not talking about driving a Ford in there into Philadelphia. Some of them coming there by wagon, some of them coming on horseback. So they're arriving at different times. But I will tell you this: the mere fact that there were 19 of them, not 17 as I originally said. I went back and checked behind myself. It's 19 of them that were slave owners. The mere fact that they would be in that room and still agree to the language that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they're endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights, among which are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that speaks to their greatness. Because it's speaking against the interests that they had inherited. And people need to understand this, because they get this wrong all the time. Everybody gets it wrong. Because they don't see that the founders were inheriting an institution. And what they were doing by the declaration in that room, and thereafter the things that came from it thereafter, in Article 1, Section 2, Clause, don't tell me, in Article 1, Section 2, Clause 3, the 3/5 clause, where they are attempting, through the Declaration of Independence, all men are created equal. They are attempting through the 3/5 clause to limit the slave power, even though there are slave owners in that room. Both documents that were created in this country were anti-slavery documents. Both of them are anti-slavery documents. The Constitution is definitely an anti-slavery document. Article 1, Section 2, Clause 3 shows that. And then Article 1, Section 9 Article 1, Section 3, Article 1, Section 9, Clause 3, where it limits, it says that the slave trade will be allowed to go on for a generation. It doesn't say generation, it says 20 years. But the reason why it says 20 years is because 20 years is a generation. And they're waiting for the generation that owned slaves at that point to, not hoping people will die, but it will die out. And by that time, they could make the amendments to the document so as to get rid of slavery. And that's why they were not allowing slaves to come into the country after the 20-year period. Now, it has to be a law passed after 20 years to bring that about. But the Constitution allows for the amendment of the slave trade to go on after a 20-year period of time. Why did they do that? But agreeing to it in the present, but not and allowing it for 20 years, because you're trying to build the nation and you're trying to glue the nation together with states that have slaves in those states. But you're also at the same time walking a fine line in agreeing to it and recognizing it, and at the same time making boundaries through which you can get rid of it when a time, in fact, is peculiar to allow that to take place. The document speaks to that, and people cannot read it. And they got all these schools here, and people cannot read the document. They're too busy talking about critical race theory, which is being carried out by historical hobos. Got to wrap this up. Talking too long. Didn't get to everything I want to talk about as usual. But I want you to think about these things here, because if we don't stand up for this document, we're going to lose this country with the kind of people that's running it right now. Okay, I got to get out of here. I'll be back next week. Got to tell you some other things we didn't get to today. Until next week, I want you to follow your dream. If you don't follow your dream, you will never know what's on the other side of the rainbow.